Hey, welcome back everybody, and welcome to our last presentation of the semester in our subject. And this is more of a practical approach to ticket writing. It's something that all patrol members do once or twice or more so per shift. There's a lot of violation contact with other people using the road or not using it properly, and this is a bit of a practical guide as far as what each part of the ticket may be used for and how it would be delivered. So these tickets written under what we call the POPA Act, which is Provincial Offences Procedures Act, they're legal documents and of course require the proper attention to detail. Fill in the wrong blanks and it could be quashed come court time. So every violation ticket needs to be consistent. Failure to complete any information required in a ticket does not invalidate the ticket or any part of it, as long as the accused is identified with reasonable clarity and the offense is specified and the date of the offense is specified and location. So if you have those parts right, your ticket may still go ahead. However, if you have anything else wrong, including court dates or sections and such, then very likely that a member would have to get a hold of the person, advise them that that particular ticket has been quashed, they can garbage it, and either there's a new issuance of a ticket or it's just scratched altogether. So there are 4 parts to the violation ticket, and obviously you write on the front of the ticket. It's carbon copied to the other 3 pages beneath it. What's nice is once that front part's filled out, you just have to serve either part 2 or part 3. Really, it's page 2 or page 3 of the carbon copies. And this is what the front of the violation notice or violation ticket typically looks like. Some portions can be pre-filled. This is an example from Lethbridge Police Service. So their jurisdiction and their courthouse address is already pre-filled. Same in Medicine Hat. And then it's looking for really the tombstone data as far as the identity of your the offender and who you're writing the ticket for and what section of the act and what act they've breached, and then there's a court date and whether it's voluntary payment or mandatory court and those types of things, including their MVID number, which is part of the driver's license information as well, and then the vehicle particulars, and then that's served on them at roadside. And again, this is kind of a practical exercise. Had we been in class, you may have been hands-on with a ticket, but this is what we're looking at. We've looked at sort of the part 1 or page 1 already, sort of center of the image here on this slide. However, on the reverse of that page 1 is also the affidavit of service. Now that is sometimes completed and sometimes not, depending on what offense and what part had been served on the violator. And further to the last slide, this is typically the court date is always at least 3 weeks from the time of the violation, in order to allow enough time for the paper to be submitted through our office to the court office and then filed accordingly. So we want to give at least 3 weeks notice, and there's certain dates in each jurisdiction that are for basically traffic court or violation court, and so you want to make sure you have the appropriate date marked down. Now again, depending on the offense, Part 2 tickets are the pink copies underneath the original, and it is the summons copy. And this is used for most offenses other than moving vehicle violations. So it includes bylaws and the majority of other provincial acts as well. And the enforcement of these laws, again, is empowered by the Provincial Offences Procedures Act, which can also speak to court dates, warrants being issued, and all those kinds of things that all fall under the POPA, which is, again, abbreviation for Provincial Offences Procedures Act. Now, this is issued with a court appearance date, with or without a voluntary payment associated to it, depending on the summons, again, and the offense that it's associated with. So this is the fun part of the ticket service, especially at roadside, and you get smoother at your delivery with the people you come in contact with. But if the voluntary payment is given along with the summons of the Part 2 ticket, then a fine must be paid on or before the court date. So the subject's options are to either appear in court if they want to dispute the ticket or pay at the time, or they can pay the fine ahead of time if they wish. If the subject does neither, the ticket ends up going the warrant. And all those fun things can be explained to the person as you serve them their copy. And usually the backs of the tickets are all include their options as well, which you can point out to them if they're not really paying too much attention to what you're delivering at the time. And as most summonses, or all summonses, whether criminal or otherwise, they must be sworn to. So again, the reverse of the Part 1 or page 1 will have the affidavit of service, as well as the front of the Part 1 has a portion that allows you to swear before a commissioner of oaths. So again, this is what your summons that you're serving to the person will look like. If you notice sort of midway down, there's only the right column just above the court date, which shows summons, so offense notice doesn't even appear, which is usually a paragraph to the left of that summons box, checkbox. And it speaks only to what they need to know for the purpose of following through with the ticket served as a summons. Again, 21 days at least for your offense, from the offense date for a court date, and on the back is affidavit of service once you've delivered your summons to the offender. Alright, so the violation ticket Part 2 summons is served on the accused in one of the following ways. And the first option is if the accused is an individual, and you can do that by leaving it at their address with a person over 18 years of age, or serve personally on them. So those are kind of your only two options in the first. And then the second, if the accused is a municipality, for example, then you must serve personally to the chief elected official or chief administration officer, pardon my English. And then again, the affidavit is then filled out afterwards. And two more options on the next slide here, and that is if the accused is a Métis settlement, must be served personally to the chairman or administrator of that settlement. And lastly, if the accused is a corporation other than the others that we've covered, municipalities or Métis settlements, then you can either send it registered mail to the office of that corporation, or secondly, is personally serve it to either the manager, secretary, or other executive officer or person in charge at the address of the branch. Make sure, of course, you get their name, birth date, and such, and have some sort of proof of ID when you do serve. So lastly, as we wrap up the summons Part 2 portion of violation tickets, if the accused does not appear in court, the justice can do one of the following, and they can either set a new trial date, they can issue a warrant, or they can conduct an ex parte trial. Ex parte trials is essentially holding the trial in the absence of the accused. Again, one of the options the accused is typically given is if they wish to debate or argue the ticket, but they do not wish to be present, they can always submit a letter arguing their point, and that can also be brought up in the ex parte. Otherwise, really, it's heavily weighted on the evidence that's been provided by the issuer of the ticket and the evidence regarding the offense, and then they render that decision, and then the person's advised afterward the fact. Okay, here's basically the violation ticket. It's Part 3, the offense notice. It's yellow in color, as you see. It's the one I'm more familiar with, but I've issued both in the past. Only reason I'm more familiar with this is I tended to go after, well, the obvious, the speeders, the seatbelts, non-seatbelt wearers, and those kinds of things when I was in patrols. And generally, in dealing with those types of things, the violation ticket was what we ended up issuing. So it's used for offenses associated with a vehicle, and always requires a specified penalty. So that's always an option when we're issuing the yellow ticket, the Part 3, up to a maximum fine of $1,000. That does not include the surcharge. Any more than that, and we'd be using the summons portion. So again, you can see on the right hand side of the slide, it's the reverse of the Part 3 offense notice, and you can see options 1, 2, and 3. Lots of explanation there for the violator as far as what their options are, whether they want to pay or dispute it either in person or in writing, and otherwise. So at least they're well informed, and you can explain those portions of the ticket for them if they're willing to listen. Again, always the fun part of issuing the ticket. Generally, people have been pretty receptive when I've dealt with them. There's only been a few people that grabbed it out of my hand and didn't want to hear anything more from me and put their vehicle in drive. But for the most part, if you deliver things with respect, but firm at the same time, they'll tend to listen, at least to their options before you part ways. Okay, moving on with Part 3 tickets, again the yellow ticket. Some pro tips here before we carry on. As far as when you're writing out the ticket, some practical things. There is no such thing as a general traffic stop or a typical or routine traffic stop. There is no such thing as routine. A lot of police personnel have been harmed and or killed in routine quote-unquote traffic stops. So always be alert. I generally, when I was writing my tickets, I had a ticket book sort of folder that I was able to write on the steering wheel, so that I always was able to keep my eye glancing upwards to the violator to make sure, one, they didn't pull away on me, or two, get out of their vehicle, get out of the door, and I'm going to approach you. So always keep your eye open for that stuff. And lastly, in being courteous and making sure everything goes smooth, I always offer to, if they need assistance pulling back into the traffic, If you're on a busy road, you can always stand out and stop traffic to enable them to get back into the flow as well. So I've always offered to ask them if they needed a hand getting back onto the road, and go from there. Okay, back to the slide. Violation tickets. They allow for the payment of a fine by a certain date. Again, I pointed out those 3 options on the back of the ticket, and I explained them generally. You don't have to get into too much detail. And it's reserved, the yellow ticket part 3 is reserved for moving vehicle violations where the violator has a valid Alberta driver's license. If they're out of province, you could give consideration to summons instead. So with Part 3 offense notices, the accused will never be liable to imprisonment if they do not attend court or pay their fine. They'll be convicted in absence without a hearing. And if the accused does not pay, a late payment is added to the fine and is forwarded to the registries. So that next time they register their driver's license or the vehicle registration, anything associated that way, through the licensing bureau, they'll be tagged then, and it'll still catch up with them. That late fine will be also tabbed on there, and that's essentially it. Now, I have a few acquaintances that thought they could just beat the system by not paying the fine because they were ticketed out of province, and once they got back to Alberta, there's no biggie, it won't catch up with them, but the fines are reciprocal. There are reciprocal agreements with the registries through British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. So if you think you're skipping out on another province, it's still going to catch up with you. And you'll be paying, again, that surcharge in addition to the fine once you renew things at the licensing branch. A certificate of offense must be checked off, and it does not, unlike the summons, require being sworn to. So violation note or offense notices do not require being sworn to. Okay, in the next couple slides we just get into the service aspect of serving the offense notice on our offenders. And the offense notice must be served on the accused in one of the following ways. And then one is the accused is an individual, you personally serve them, or you end up charging the registered owner and sent via regular mail. As many of you may know, and I'm aware as well, that's how photo radar often operates, whereas the registered owner of the vehicle is served as a result of a speeding ticket. Secondly, the accused, if they're a municipality, they are personally served the chief elected official or chief administrator, or charged as a registered owner can also happen via regular mail. So again, options 3 and 4 looks relatively similar to the summons, although personally serving it on somebody is always an option here with the offense notice. So if the accused is a Métis settlement, you can personally serve it on the chairman or administrator, or if charged as an RO, again regular mail. And lastly, if the accused is a corporation, can personally serve it on a manager, secretary, executive officer, or person in charge of that branch. And lastly, again, charged as an RO, registered offender, or registered offender. Anyway, the registered person, and they can be served via regular mail. Now, if you'll notice the difference with summons, the summons was via registered mail, whereas the offense notices can be delivered via regular mail. And that reason being, the summons, then next steps are warrants for arrest. So we want to make sure that we have that proof that the subject had been served personally before there's a warrant issued. So that's why it's registered mail for summonses versus regular mail with offense notices. Okay, violation tickets, part 4. Again, it's the final of the back page of the ticket, and it's also white. And although it'll be imprinted through carbon copies from, again, you scribbling on the top page, part 1. And on the reverse, it looks exactly like your part 1, the part 4 ticket, but on the reverse of the part 4 is the what we call the backing of that ticket. And this is really where it shows what kind of investigator you are and how important you think going through court and making sure that that person is convicted properly. Basically, make as many notes as you can. I've seen some members, some officers, have in the back of their ticket pretty lean. Come court time, 6 months later, if you're going to trial on a ticket, you can look pretty silly if all you have is a couple of scribble notes. So be thorough in your in backing your ticket. You can see everything from height and the weight, the eye color, hair, particulars, the road conditions, whether they were the registered owner or not, all those kinds of things. I even include how many other people were in the vehicle, including the driver, who's typically who you're ticketing. And then at the bottom, the details, that's your storyline. And I usually fill that entire thing up with ink as far as what happened in my observations, so that, again, come trial time, because you will be subpoenaed if you issue a ticket and the person objects and wants their day in court. And you're going to appear, and you can either look really poorly, and lawyers pay attention to that come criminal trials as well, as far as how thorough an officer you are, or you can be very professional. So fill out the details in the back of that ticket, and you'll be a solid come whether it's another traffic court date or whether you end up in criminal court giving evidence. So this slide just reiterates kind of my ramblings on the last slide with the Part 4 violation ticket. Make good notes. So when you're required again to attend court, that's you'll have that copy for your reference, and that's where you write your notes so that you'll be well informed come your court date when you're giving evidence. Okay, we're down to our last 4 slides of the semester. This is just speaking to and opening your mind that there are also municipal tags or municipal tickets for in my purposes, usually I was using them for parking tickets and that, but there are, as you can see, different bylaw and traffic infractions and that you can use it for. And the page 1 looks as shown, and it's a bit smaller ticket, obviously, than the offense notices and summonses, and it's pretty straightforward in filling in your blanks. Okay, and this is the page 2 or carbon copy of the ticket, which is white, and that's generally what you're issuing to the offender. And the back of that, as you can see, it shows an A through E as far as different methods of payment. If you look at sub B, it's if a person pays within a certain period, the fine is reduced to $25, otherwise they pay the full fine. So a little encouragement there for people to look after business sooner than later. So again, these municipal tags, they're a short form ticket, and they're used only in certain cities, certain jurisdictions. Medicine Hat does use them. They're normally used just for non-moving offenses. So again, typically what I used them for was parking violations and that, and generally used for illegal parking or other offenses of other nature, but the vehicle is parked. Maybe, for example, an unregistered vehicle or no plate on the vehicle and it's parked on the road. You may use this form of ticketing and leave it under the wiper blade for them to view next to their back to the vehicle. So again, that page 2, the white copy, is what is left with the offender or the vehicle. And whether it's on the windshield or if it's a trailer that's parked illegally on the road, it can be left on the tongue of the trailer. May want to get a little fancy and use a sandwich baggie or something like that if the weather is pretty inclement, and leave it there for their attention. Make notes in your notebook or in the back of that yellow copy, because again, from my experience, I've actually had more pushback or more complaints from people receiving parking tickets than people I've gone face to face with in traffic violations. So make good notes, and you'll always be prepared to address things either in court or if they call back or want to speak to your supervisor or otherwise. Okay, last slide. So this is an example of the city of Lethbridge. The city of Medicine Hat is very similar. However, the main bylaws you'll use this municipal ticket for are such as a traffic bylaw, streets bylaw, business licenses, firearms and archery bylaws, noise bylaws, recreational facilities, cemetery bylaws, and refuse bylaws. So those are some of the examples of the main ones you'd be using that municipal form for versus the offense notice or summons. I'm going to be leaving a list of instructions as I add this to the blackboard as far as when the final exam will be. There will be a final exam and it will be all inclusive, but I'll have those dates, and then I'm just going to confirm it with Jim once we're back on Monday, and I'll post those details in writing on the blackboard that complements this last slideshow for your reference. Take care of yourselves. I hope everyone's doing well, and keep your heads up, and I wish you all the best of luck in the future. Take care.